Okay. Have you ever been accused of breaking rules you never agreed to, and then watched your entire neighborhood turn against you? Well, imagine being reported to the police by a homeowners association you didn't even belong to, only to find out later that you actually owned the land they were standing on. Yeah, this isn't just a story about property lines or paperwork. It's about respect, justice, and one quiet man who decided to stand up when everyone else told him to sit down. So grab a seat, because you're about to hear how "I'm not in your HOA" turned into the day the HOA called the cops on their new landlord. It started with a knock that didn't sound friendly. You know the kind. Sharp, fast, like the person on the other side already decided they were mad at you. I had just finished moving into my late uncle's property on Maple Drive. The place wasn't fancy. A one-story brick home with an overgrown yard and a sagging fence. But it was mine now. Or at least, that's what I thought. When I opened the door, there stood 3 people in crisp polo shirts, clipboards in hand, and that unmistakable air of self-importance. The one in front, a woman in her 50s with perfectly pressed khakis, smiled the way a debt collector smiles before saying your payment's late. "Good afternoon. We're with the Maple Creek OA," she said. "We need to discuss a few violations on your property." "Violations?" I blinked. "I just moved in yesterday." She looked me up and down, unimpressed. "Well, it seems your grass is over 6 inches high, and that fence in the back isn't up to code. We'll also need you to remove that trailer from your driveway." IA policy. I tried not to laugh, thinking this must be some kind of mistake. "I think you've got the wrong house," I said. "I'm not part of your HOA." Her smile vanished. "Every home in Maple Creek Estates falls under HOA management. Except this one," I said, holding up my deed. "This property was never annexed into Maple Creek. It's outside your boundaries." Her expression hardened. "Sir, I think you're mistaken." And just like that, the meeting turned icy. They left after a few passive-aggressive remarks, but that was only the beginning. The next morning, I found an orange violation notice taped to my mailbox. Then another one appeared on my fence. They said I owed $350 in fines. At first, I ignored them, but within a week, I was being harassed almost daily. Random inspection visits, cars parked in front of my driveway, and one man with a clipboard who actually stepped onto my lawn to measure the height of my grass. That's when I decided to stand my ground. I called the HOA office and demanded to speak to their president, a man named Richard Moore. When he picked up, his tone was all authority and arrogance. "Sir, if you live within Maple Creek Estates, you are subject to our bylaws." "And if I don't live within Maple Creek Estates?" I asked calmly. He hesitated for half a second. "Then you're still adjacent to HOA property. That means your home affects community standards. We can still enforce." "Actually, no," I cut in. "That's not how the law works. My property isn't part of your OA. You have zero jurisdiction here." There was silence on the line, then a low, angry sigh. "We'll see about that." The next day, I heard police sirens outside my home. 2 officers stood in my driveway while Richard and 2 HOA board members pointed at me from the curb. The older woman from before folded her arms, smirking. One officer approached me. "Sir, we received a report of a disturbance and a potential violation of HOA property regulations." I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Officer, they called you because my grass is too tall?" The officer looked uncomfortable. "Well, they said you refused to comply with community rules." "That's because I'm not in their community," I said, showing him the property documents I had already printed out in anticipation of something like this. The officer read through them, his eyebrows rising higher with each page. He turned back to the HOA members. "He's right. His property line is outside the HOA jurisdiction. You folks don't have any authority here." Richard's face turned red, the kind of red that comes from pride cracking under pressure. "This isn't over," he muttered before storming off. I thought that was the end of it. But I didn't know then just how deep this rabbit hole went, or that the land my uncle left me wasn't just one housey, it was the land underneath their entire development. And soon, the people who tried to find me for my fence would find themselves paying me rent. A week passed after the police incident, and things around Maple Drive went quiet. Too quiet. The HOA stopped sending their so-called violation notices. But every time I stepped outside I could feel eyes on me. Curtains twitched, whispers followed, and cars slowed when they passed my house. I tried to shrug it off. I'd dealt with small town gossip before. But this felt different. It wasn't curiosity. It was hostility. They wanted me gone. Then, one morning, as I was sipping coffee on the porch, a white SUV pulled up. A man in a suit stepped out, holding a leather briefcase. He introduced himself as Daniel Hayes, a representative from my late uncle's estate lawyer. "Mr. Carter," he said with a polite nod, "we've just finished auditing your uncle's holdings. There's something you need to see." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. Deeds, maps, and legal filings. He laid them out across my porch table like puzzle pieces. And then I saw it. My uncle hadn't just left me his house. He had owned nearly 20 acres of land stretching behind it. Land that had been leased years ago to a development company that later built Maple Creek Estates. My jaw dropped. "You're saying I own?" "Technically," Daniel said with a small smile, "you own everything under the HOA's development. The homes, the park, the clubhouse. All sit on your land. The developer signed a 25-year lease with your uncle. That lease expired 3 months ago." I just stared at him. The same people who called the cops on me were, without realizing it, living on property that now belonged to me. "Do they know this?" I asked. Daniel shook his head. "Not yet. The developer dissolved years ago, and the HOA's board assumed they owned the lots outright. You're within your rights to renegotiate leases, or even reclaim the land." For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I looked down the street, at the manicured lawns and rows of identical homes. Families lived there. Kids rode their bikes past the same people who had treated me like a criminal. I didn't want revenge, but I did want respect, so I made a plan. 3 days later, I attended the HOA's next public meeting. It was held in their little clubhouse, a beige building with fluorescent lights and bad coffee. When I walked in, the chatter died instantly. Richard, the HOA president, narrowed his eyes. "Mr. Carter," he said coldly, "this is a private meeting for HOA members only." I smiled faintly. "Actually, I believe I have every right to be here. You're all standing on my property." A few people laughed nervously, thinking I was joking. I wasn't. I set a folder down on the table and slid out copies of the land deeds, the old lease, and the expiration notice. You see, my uncle was the original landowner. When the developer built Maple Creek, they never purchased the land, only leased it. That lease has expired. Which means, as of now, I'm your landlord. Gasps filled the room. Someone muttered, "That can't be true." Richard snatched up the papers, scanning them, his face growing pale. This must be a mistake." "No mistake," I said evenly. "You've been operating your HOA on land that legally belongs to me. I could, by law, demand rent or even terminate occupancy. But I'm not here to throw anyone out." The room went silent again. Every eye was on me. "I'm here," I continued, "to make things right. I don't want your fines, your rules, or your power trips. I just want this community to stop treating people like they're beneath you. The HOA was supposed to make life better, not turn neighbors into enemies." A woman in the back, one of the same who had taped a notice to my door, stood up, guilt written all over her face. "We didn't know. We thought." "I know what you thought," I said gently. "And maybe that's part of the problem. You assumed I was an outsider, someone who didn't belong. But the truth is, I belong here just as much as anyone. Maybe more. For the first time, Richard didn't have anything to say. He looked like a man who'd built his kingdom on sand and just watched the tide come in. After a long silence, I pushed the final document across the table. A new community agreement. It stated that the HOA could remain, but only under new terms: no harassment, no fines for petty things, and no enforcement beyond what the residents voted on together. In exchange, I'd renew their land use under a fair, affordable lease. The members murmured among themselves. Then, one by one, they nodded, some even clapped quietly. Richard, his pride visibly cracking, signed first. A few weeks later, things began to change. The HOA rules softened. Neighbors started waving when I passed. The same woman who once called the police on me brought over a pie as a peace offering. Even Richard came by one afternoon, awkwardly holding a stack of papers. "You were right," he admitted. "We lost sight of what community meant. I guess it took the landlord to remind us." I smiled and shook his hand. "It's not about ownership, Richard, it's about respect." That night, as the sun set over Maple Drive, I sat on my porch again. The same spot where this all began. The cicadas hummed, kids laughed in the distance, and for the first time, the air didn't feel heavy. Sometimes, life has a strange way of revealing who people really are. And what really matters. It's not titles or authority, or whose name is on a list. It's how you treat the person next door. And as I watched the lights flicker on across the neighborhood, I couldn't help but smile. They'd called the cops on me for not being part of their HOA. Now, I was the landlord who helped them remember what being neighbors truly meant. Message: respect can't be enforced with fines or rules. It's earned through kindness, humility, and the courage to stand up when others push you down.